Hey there, how's it going everybody? In this video, I'm going to write a quick and easy script that monitors my personal website and sends me an email if it's down for any reason. Now, if the site is down, then I'm also going to have the script automatically restart my server to see if that fixes the problem. Now, a lot of people have wanted me to make videos on real-world problems that I can solve with programming, and this is a script that I've been needing to write for a while now. So my personal website runs on a server that is pretty old at this point, and it really just needs to be completely wiped and updated so that it's more stable. But it's one of those things that I just haven't had the time to do. But with the server in its current state, sometimes web processes occasionally quit unexpectedly and cause my website not to load. Now, for those of you who have followed along with either my Flask or Django series, then don't worry, the servers that we set up in that series are completely fine and stable. This is just a server that I set up years and years ago that I used to test a lot of different software and development, and then I just plot my personal website on there. So after all those years of having different configurations and installations, it's just not very stable anymore. So until I can get around to updating that, I'm just going to write a quick script that occasionally checks my website, and if it's not returning a 200 response, which means that it was a successful response, then I'll just have it send me an email so that I know I need to go fix it. Now, this website is hosted on Linode, so I'll also use the Linode API to automatically restart the server so that it possibly fixes itself before I even get the email. So this is going to be a pretty quick and easy script, but I thought some of you might find it useful to see me write this up. Now, I'm not going to go into as much step-by-step detail as to exactly what I'm doing like I do in my other tutorials. I'm just going to step through this quickly and give you an idea of how a quick script can help you solve a real-world problem like this. So let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, I'm going to create a directory of everything for this little project. So I'm in my home folder within my terminal, and I'm going to create a directory called site monitor. So I'm going to say mkdir site underscore monitor. Now I'm on a Mac, which mostly uses Linux commands. If you're on Windows, then you'll have to either do this through your file explorer or use the Windows commands for your command prompt. Okay, so I'm going to cd into that directory that I just created. And now I'm going to create a virtual environment for this little project. Now, I've been using the venv module in the Python standard library lately instead of virtualenv, and it's pretty simple to use, and you don't have to install anything. So I can just say Python 3-m venv, and then I'll call this virtual environment monitor underscore env. So I will run that. So now I have a new virtual environment called monitor underscore env. So now I can activate that. So I'll say source monitor env /bin/activate. So that is now activated. We can see from the prompt here that it's active. And again, this source command is for Mac and Linux. If you're on Windows, then you would do something like this. You'd say monitor env /scripts /activate.bat or something like that. I think that's right. But this is on Mac and Linux. Okay, so now I have a fresh environment, and I'm going to be using a couple of packages for this script. So I'm going to use the request library to check the response from my website, and I do have a more in-depth video on the request library if you'd like to see how to use this in more detail. So I'll leave a link to that video in the description section below. And I'm also going to be using the Linode Python library to interact with my server. So I have this open here in the browser, and let me go to that documentation here. So this is the Linode Python library that allows you to interact with your Linodes through Python. And we'll see more about this later in the tutorial. So now we want to install both of those packages, and we can do that through pip. So once we've got the environment activated, let's pip install these packages. So first I'll install the request library. So I'll say pip install requests, and this one is usually pretty quick. Okay, that's done. And also I want to install the Linode Python library that I can use to talk to my Linode servers through Python. So to do that, I can say pip install, and that is Linode underscore API 4. Now, if you want to know how I got that, it's here in their documentation, pip install Linode API 4. So let me run that. Now with this Linode Python library, we're going to need a personal access token in order to interact with our Linode account. And that's good because it's a layer of security that makes us prove who we are before doing anything with our servers. But let's go ahead and continue on with the email script for now. And I'll grab that personal access token once we're ready to interact with the Linode server. Okay, so now that we have those packages installed, let's actually write the script to monitor the website. So I'm still here within my directory for this project. So I'm going to open this up in Sublime. So I'm just going to do that with subl and then dot for the current directory. Now I have my command line shortcut set up to open Sublime with that subl command. If you don't have that, then you can just open this directory in your text editor like you normally would. Okay, so now I'm going to create a new script in this directory, so new file, and I'm going to call this monitor.py. So now we have an empty Python script here. Okay, so first I'm going to import the request library. Okay, so now we're going to use request to make a request to my home page. So we can do that by saying r is equal to request.get, and this needs to be in a string here. So this is https /coreyms.com, and I'm going to set a timeout there equal to, let's say, 5 seconds. Now you want to set a timeout when doing something like this, because if your site isn't responding and it gets hung up, then by default the request library will just wait indefinitely. So with a timeout set, it will only wait that number of seconds that you specify before giving up and throwing an exception. So if my site doesn't respond in 5 seconds, then I'll just assume that something's up. Okay, so now I'm going to check to make sure that the response of that request has a status code of 200. So 200 response is a successful response. And if the response isn't a 200 response, then I'll want to send myself an email and restart my server. So I'm going to say if r.status, whoops, let me spell that right, status underscore code is not equal to 200. Now the response object also has an attribute called OK, which is set to true if the response is less than 400. So I could have also written that like this, if not r.ok. But that OK value would be true for any response that isn't, a 400 or 500 error. And I know for sure that I'm expecting a 200 response. So that's what I'm checking for specifically. So I'm not using that OK value that you may have seen in other tutorials. Okay, so if the response isn't a 200 response, then first I want to send myself an email letting me know that something is up. So to do this, we're going to need to use a mail server. So I'm going to use my Gmail account, but you can use whatever you'd like. So whatever you use, you'll have to look up the instructions online for how to connect to that server. So it's pretty simple for Gmail. You do need to let Gmail know that you're going to be connecting to your account through a program. And I have the instructions pulled up here in the browser as well. So if you don't have two-factor authentication, then you can just go to your Google settings and allow connection through less secure apps. So this is at myaccount.google.com/less secure apps. And I'll put links to these in the description sections below. But I do have two-factor authentication on my machine. So in order to connect to your account while you have two-factor authentication, then you're going to need to create a password specifically for our app. And you can do that through this account here, myaccount.google.com/app passwords. And I will put a link to this URL in the description section below as well. And you can see here that in my app passwords, I created one called Python test that I use for connecting through Python applications. Now, like I said, I'll put a link in the description section below to both of these Google pages if you want to know how to set this up for yourself. So once you have your Google security settings in order, then we connect to the Google Mail server with the built-in smtplib module in Python. So first I'm going to import that at the top of our script. So I'll pull this back up, and right above request, I'm going to say import smtplib and save that. And now to set this up to send an email, within my conditional here, I'm going to say with smtplib.smtp, and the mail server here is going to be smtp.gmail.com. And for the second argument, we pass in the port. So this is going to be 587. And this is all in their documentation online. So I don't actually memorize this stuff. I have references to how this works. Okay, so now we have this SMTP connection to their mail server. So now we're going to say smtp.ehlo. Now the ehlo method just identifies ourselves with the mail server that we're using. And now we want to encrypt our traffic. So to do that, I can say smtp, not smtp lib, smtp.starttls. And that's going to be a method. And then we need to rerun that ehlo method again to re-identify ourselves as an encrypted connection. So I will just copy that and paste it in there. Okay, and now that we're encrypted, we can log in to our mail server. So I'm going to come down here and say smtp.login. And now at this point, we can put in our email address and password. Now, you can put this directly in the script if you'd like, but I think it's a good habit never to put sensitive information like this into a script directly. I think that you should always put sensitive information like this either in a configuration file somewhere that isn't committed to source code, or in environment variables. So for this video, I've put my credentials inside environment variables so that I don't have to write them out here on video for everyone to see. Now, if you've never used environment variables to hide information like this, then I do have a separate video to show how to do that for Mac, Linux, and Windows. So I'll leave a link to those videos in the description section below if anyone would like to see how that's done. But I've already put those environment variables created with that information, so I can load those in by importing the OS module. So up here at the top, I'm going to say import OS. And at the top of my file here, I'm going to create some variables using those environment variables. So I'm going to create one called email address, and I'm going to set that equal to os.environ.get. That's how you get environment variables. And I created these environment variables and I called them email_user. And now let me create another variable here called email_password. And the environment variable for that was email_pass. So again, you're going to have to create your own environment variables called, for your email address and for your email password. Or you can put those in a configuration variable file somewhere, any way that you want to do that. Okay, so now I'm going to log in to the Gmail server using those credentials. So that's what we pass in here to smtp.login. So first I'm going to pass in the email address, then I'm going to pass in the email password. Okay, so now let's create a simple message for our email. So I'm just going to create a simple plain text email in this video, and I'll be doing a more advanced email video in the near future where we cover attachments and HTML messages and things like that. But for this video, we just want text. So first I'm going to create a subject line. Since this will be an email about my website being down, I'm going to make it something that will catch my eye. So I will just say subject is equal to, and I'll just do all caps, your site is down with an exclamation point there. And for the body of the website, I'm just going to put something here like, make sure the server restarted and it is back up. Okay, and now I'm going to combine this subject and body into a single message. So when you're constructing a plain text email from scratch, you need to add the subject as a header and then have a couple of blank lines and then put the body of the message. So I'm going to do this using an F string. So I will just say MSG is equal to, and to do an F string, you do F and then your string. So I'll say subject and then pass in that subject. And then I'll do a couple of blank lines here. And now I will pass in the body. And again, I'm not going into as much step-by-step detail in this video, but if you've never used F strings before, I think that they're really nice to work with. And I have a more in-depth video on that topic, and I'll leave a link to that in the description section below if you'd like to learn more about those. Okay, so now I just have to send this email now that we've created this message. So I can do that here by using this format. I can say smtp.sendMail, and then we're going to want to send this to the sender and the receiver, and then the message. So we want to put the sender here and the receiver here. So for the sender, we're going to want this to be the email address that we logged in as. Now, you can put a different value there, but I wouldn't recommend it. You don't want to, spoof what email this is coming from, because it's against the rules, first of all, for imitating someone. And second of all, it's probably just going to wind up in spam. I mean, they have things in place that catch this kind of stuff. Okay, so we're putting the sender as the email address that we logged in as, and the receiver, I'm just putting as myself also. So I could put the email address here as well. But just to be more clear, let me act like I'm actually sending this to someone different. So I'm going to put in CoreyMSchafer@gmail.com, which is my email address, but that's actually the same as what this email address is as well. Okay, so that should send our email if our site is down. Now we can test this by commenting out the if statement and undenting our email section. So if I do that, let me just comment out this if statement for now and unindent the email section here. So there's no conditional that won't send this email. So if I go ahead and run this code, then we don't have any output here. But if I wait a second, then I should get an email that comes through. So I have my Gmail pulled up here on my phone, and I can see that I did just get an email that came through with the message that we specified. So that works well. Okay, so now let's set this back up to how it was within the with statement. So I will indent that back and uncomment out the conditional there. Now, also, I should mention that in Sublime, whenever you run code, you have to have a build system. And I have my build system set to my virtual environment that I created at the beginning of this video. So that is why that worked. If you don't have your build system set up to your virtual environment, then you'll have to set that in Sublime. But if that's too much of a hassle for you, then you can always come back here to your terminal and just run that manually. So you could say Python monitor.py and run the script that way. Okay, so let me go back to the script here. Okay, so now we've sent ourselves an email when the site is not responding with a 200 status code. But now I'm going to use the Linode Python library to reboot my Linode server. So in order to interact with my Linode account programmatically, I'm going to need to create an API token through my account. So I have my Linode account open here. Let me exit out of that. Okay, so I've got my Linode account open here. So in order to create an API token, we need to first go to our profile. So to get to the profile, I'm going to click on my profile picture up here at the top right, and then I can go to my profile. So within here, we can click on the tab that says API tokens. So I'm going to click on that. And we can see here that we have a section for personal access tokens. Now, I don't have any here right now, but we can create one by clicking Add a Personal Access Token. So I will create one. And for the label of this token, I'll just call this Linode-Python-token. And now I'm going to set the expiration date to never. If you want this to be, more secure and have expiration dates, then you can set those up however you want. And I'm going to give this read-write access to everything on my account. So now if I scroll down here, I can submit that token. And now it's going to pop up with the API access token. So I'm going to copy this. Now, this token actually won't be visible anymore after I close this. So you want to be sure that you copy this down or write it down somewhere. So I'm going to click OK here. And now we have our Linode Python token here within our personal access tokens. Now, don't worry, I'm going to delete this token after the video and create a new one so that no one can access my account using this token that we saw in this video. But I'll use this one for now. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to create another environment variable for this API token. So I'm not going to show that here on video since my email credentials are in there also. But like I said, if anyone doesn't know how to set environment variables, then there's a link to those videos in the description section below on how to do that. Okay, so I'm going to pull up my terminal here, and I'm going to pause the video while I add that token to my environment variables, and I'll pick it up after I've added that token. Okay, so I went in and I set an environment variable called Linode token to that token that I got from Linode. So now I can use that to interact with my Linode account through Python. So now let's go back to my script and I'll show you how this works. So let me open the script here. So first, let's import that Linode client. So to do that, up here at the top where we're doing our imports, I can say from Linode underscore API 4 import Linode client. And now I'm just going to grab that environment variable that I just set. And I'll just put this under the email address and password. So I'll say Linode underscore token is equal to, and we'll just do another os.environ.get. But this environment variable I set as Linode underscore token. Now, one important thing is that you usually need to restart everything after you set an environment variable so that those changes can take effect. Some people don't do that, and then they wonder why they can't see their variable that they just set. So if you haven't restarted, then it's probably not going to pick up those changes. So for example, let me comment out everything below here and try to print out my environment variable that I just set. So I'm going to print out that Linode token, and let me try to save that and run it. And actually I do get a response there, which I shouldn't have. I should have restarted this before I started recording this video, but this actually isn't the Linode token that we just created. This is one that I created earlier whenever I was testing all of the stuff for the video. So most likely if you haven't restarted, then you'll get a none response there. So once I restart this, we're going to get the new token. So you can see this one is 62B95E. So when I restart this, so let me restart Sublime and open this back up. So Sublime in the current directory, open that back up, open my monitor script. Now let me run this again. And we can see that now this is a different token. It picked up those changes. This one is 82B61, blah, 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 blah. And you're going to want to do that in your terminal as well. I'm not sure. Let's see. If I run this script now with python monitor.py, yeah, so I'm still getting that old token with this terminal as well. So I would have to open a new terminal and cd into that site monitor. And then I would have to activate my virtual environment again. So activate monitor underscore env bin activate. And now if I did python monitor.py, ran that, then we get the new token. So now let me resize this here and delete this other terminal that we had open. Okay, so now we are getting our correct token value. So now I'm going to leave everything commented out below this while I show you how we can restart a Linode server through Python. And after we get that working, then I'll put that logic in the correct place. So first, let's connect to Linode through our client. So we can do that. I'm going to remove this print statement. So I'm going to say client is equal to Linode client that we imported right here. And we need to create or pass in, we need to pass in this Linode token. So we're connecting to this Linode client, passing in that Linode token. And now I'm going to print out some information about my Linode servers. I only have one active server at the moment, so we should just see that one here. But to do this, I'm going to say for Linode in client.linode.instances. And within that for loop, I'm going to print out the Linode label and the ID of each instance, which I said will just be the one instance for now. So I'll say print, and I'll use an F string here again. Whoops, an F string. And I will print out first the Linode.label. Then I will do a colon and a space, and then I will print out the Linode.id. So let's save that and run it. And we can see, usually it takes longer than that, but we can see that it basically immediately came back with my Query MS server. And then this is the ID of that server. Now I'm going to want to copy that ID so that I can just connect to that single instance in order to reboot it. So to do that, First, I have to import instance up here. So we are importing Linode client. We also want to import instance. And now I'm going to copy that ID from the output. So let's copy that. And now I can connect to the Linode with that ID just by saying, and I'm going to get rid of my for loop here. So we can just say my server is equal to client.load, and we want to load an instance. So we're using instance that we imported there. And now I'm going to pass in the ID of the instance that we want to connect to. So now that I've loaded that particular Linode, I should be able to reboot that machine simply by saying my server.reboot. So let me make this output a little bit smaller here so that we can see a little bit more. So now I'm going to run this, and I'm going to open up my Linode account and check that that machine is actually rebooting. So I will save that and run it. So it should be rebooting that server with that ID. So let me open up my Linode account here, go to my dashboard. Now it doesn't look like it is rebooting yet, but let me click on there, and this will give me details. And we can see that the details here, it actually does say that it's rebooting now. So that did work in that script. So sometimes that can take a bit before that reboot actually gets triggered. But if we wait for a bit, then we should see it get started. Okay, so now that server is going to reboot, and that was triggered through our Python program. So that's great. The script is working well so far. So let me go back to the script here. So now let's take all that logic that we used to reboot our machine and move that into our conditional for if our website isn't returning a response code of 200. So I'm going to take just these 3 lines here and cut those out. And now I'm going to uncomment out what we had before where we sent our email. And actually, I'm not sure at what point this got unindented here. It was probably whenever I checked it to send the email, but this should actually be indented here within this context manager. So we want to push that here within the with statement. Okay, but after that email is sent, let's go down here, and we want to backspace to where we are not within that context manager. And now I'm going to paste in those lines, get this indentation correctly here. Let me just put all of these together since they are logically the same. So we're connecting to that Linode client, loading up the instance, and rebooting that server. And that is all within the conditional of if our status code is not equal to 200. Now, if you're wondering how I knew how to use the Linode Python library, really you just have to take the time to read through the documentation on stuff like that. There's a lot more that you can do with that API if you're interested. Honestly, this is basically all that I've used that library for, so I'm interested in learning more about it myself. Okay, so now we have a script that should send us an email and restart our server if our site doesn't respond with a 200 code. So now let's test this out. So in order to test this, let me change the URL that I'm requesting to a page that won't respond with a 200 response. So for example, just let me go to a route that doesn't exist, and that's going to return a 404 response. And since that isn't a 200 response, then it should send me an email and then restart my server. So I'm just going to go up here and change the route that we're trying to connect to. And I'm just going to do a /DNE for does not exist. So if I run this, then we don't get any output here, but if I check my email, I'm looking at my email here on my phone, and that email did come through that said your site is down. Make sure that the server restarted and is back up. So if I go back to my Linode page here, then we can see that this reboot has already started on that machine. So it's rebooting again. So it does look like our site worked in that sense. And we also get Linode notifications here that tell us when these servers are rebooting. So we can see one was 5 minutes ago and one was a few seconds ago, and then 4 days ago from where I was testing the script. Okay, so now let me go back to our script here. Now, one thing that I could probably add to this script is some feedback or logging so that we can see when events like this are triggered. But for now, I can just expect an email and can also look at my Linode to see if it's rebooting. Okay, so now that I know that that works, I'm going to set this page back here to my home page rather than a page that doesn't exist. Okay, so there's actually one more thing that we need to do with this script here. So right now we are sending an email and restarting the server if we don't get a status code of 200. But sometimes we won't even get a status code at all. It's possible that request.get is going to throw an exception. So for example, if it times out, it's going to throw an exception. Or if the server is down completely, then it's going to throw an exception. And we are not handling that right now. So what we're going to do, let's put in a try except block to where if there's any exceptions, then we go ahead and send this email and restart the server. And also, if we do get a response code, then we'll check if that is a 200 response or not. So I think the best thing to do here is to move all of this functionality into a function so that we can run this in multiple scenarios. So here at the top of my script, underneath my environment variables, I'm going to create two different functions here. So I'll call one of these, let's see, notify user, something like that. And I don't think we need any arguments into this function. I'm just going to take all of our email stuff here and I will cut that out. And I'm going to put all of that here within this notify user function. So now, and we could add arguments to this function if we wanted to. So for example, we could put a custom sender and receiver here for the email, something like that. All of this is just hard coded into this script for my personal example. So I'm just going to leave it as is. But if you wanted to customize it and make this, more customizable, then you could add those in here. Okay, so I'm going to call that notify user, and then I will create another function here, and I will call this reboot server. And again, I'm just going to take the code from there and put it into this function here. So now I can just say when our status code is not equal to 200, we want to notify the user and we want to reboot the server. And now that we have those in functions, now we can also check if we get an exception and do the same thing if we hit an exception here. So I'm going to create a try and accept block here. So I'll just do a basic try except. Now I'm going to copy where we are doing this request and I will paste that into our try block. So what we're doing is we are trying this code here. And if we hit an exception, and I'm just going to leave this as any exception. There are different exceptions and you can, get more in depth with this and more specific if you want. But I'm just going to say if we hit any exception, then that means that our request wasn't successful. So I'm going to want to notify myself and I'm going to go ahead and try to reboot my server anyways. So again, what we're saying here is we're trying to make this request. If we get an exception, I want to send that email and reboot the server. If that success, or if we did get a response, then we're checking, okay, is the response that we got a 200 response? If not, then I want you to also send that email and reboot the server. So to test this, let me actually log into my Linode and I will go ahead and just stop Apache completely. And that should cause us not to get a response at all. And then we'll see, and that will make an exception. And then we'll see if it also sends the email and reboots our server in that case. So let me try this out. I'm actually SSH'd into my Linode machine right here. And this is my server. And currently I have Apache running here. So let me try to just stop Apache. So I need to put in my password there. Now it says stopping web server. So I just took down my personal website and now I shouldn't get any response at all. So now let's try to run this code again. And we don't get any output here. Oh, actually we did get an error here. Yeah, so I know what this is. This was a dumb mistake. Some of you probably caught it before I even did it. But if we get an error here, then this our variable here is never even going to be set to begin with. So I'm going to put this up here within my try block as well. So now if we get an exception thrown on here, then it's going to hop down here and send the email and reboot the server. If we didn't get an exception, it'll continue on and check the status code and send the email and reboot the server. The reason that it threw an error when that was located outside of the try except block is because if this is an error right here, then that never gets set. That R variable never gets set. So when we were trying to access it down here, it didn't know what it was. Okay, so now let me try to save and run that script again. Now, it probably did send that email and it probably did reboot my server because it still hit that exception before it ran into that error. So let me check my email here really quick. Yeah, and I can see that my site actually is down. And if I go back to my Linode, it may have already restarted actually. Yes, it did. It restarted 2 minutes ago. So let's run this again and see if this works. So I'll run that. Now we shouldn't get any output. And if I check my email, now this might actually not be down because when it restarted, it probably restarted Apache as well. So let me try to log back in to my Linode and shut that down and try it one more time. Okay, so I paused the video and I signed back into my Linode server here. And now let me do the same thing again. So when it restarted, if I run Apache status, once I restarted the server, it started Apache again. So let me stop that. Okay, it stopped. And now let's run the script again. It's going to hit this exception and send the email. Okay, so run this. We don't get any output, which is what we expect. I'm looking at my phone here, and I just got an email that says that my site is down and that the server is restarting. So if we open this back up, we just got a notification that a few seconds ago that we scheduled a reboot. And we can see that the machine is rebooting here. And down here, I am getting this notification that I just got kicked out of my SSH session, and that is because the server is now down. But once that reboots, then our website will be working. So we can see here that my website is down because Apache was stopped. And once this finishes rebooting, then my site should be up. So I'm going to pause the video and wait for this to finish, and then I'll go and try my website again. Okay, so I paused the video there for a second and let the reboot finish. And now I'm logged back into my Linode server here. And now if I check the Apache status, now it is running. So if I go back to my website here and try to reload this, then now this loads up just the way it should. Everything is working nicely. So we can see that's a nice feature there that if our Apache even shuts down for any reason whatsoever, then it's just going to automatically try to restart. So I think that is a pretty nice feature that we added in there. Okay, so now I have a working script that I can run anytime that I want to check the status of my website, and it will perform those actions if there are any issues. But what if I want to run this script every 10 minutes or so that this process of checking the website is automated? So I don't want to have to actually run this script manually every time I want to check my website. The point is that something is monitoring our website for us. So in order to do this, we're going to need to use some sort of task scheduler. Now, again, I am on Mac. Oops, I want to go ahead and exit that session there. So like I was saying, I am on a Mac. So the task scheduler used on Mac and Linux is called cron. Now, if you're on Windows, then I believe it's actually called task scheduler. So you can use the scheduler for your operating system. But since I'm on a Mac, I'm going to use cron. So let's say that we want to run our website check every 10 minutes. So first, what command do we actually want to run? So remember, we created a virtual environment for our little project here. Now, when we installed all those packages, we installed them in our virtual environment. So that is the version of Python that we need to run our script with so that it has access to those specific packages. Now we have our environment activated now, but if we don't have our environment activated, then we can simply run our script with the Python executable from that environment. So to do this, we just need to specify the path to that Python version. So on my machine, that would look like this. So with the environment activated, I can say which Python, and we can see that it gives us the full path to the Python from that environment that is activated. Now this is just my home folder here. So a short version of this, I could just use a tilde and then copy the rest after this. And if I run that, then we can see that it just runs that version of Python. So I can, import requests, and that should work because we have pip installed that inside that environment. So that is the Python command that we're going to run. And we're also going to want to specify the full path to the script as well, since we don't want to rely on it being from a relative directory. So on my machine, the path to that script would be the home folder in site monitor, and that is monitor.py. So the entire command, if I paste in what I had before, let me put the home folder there. So this is going to be the entire command that we're going to run every 10 minutes. So we have the full path to the Python executable for that virtual environment and the full path to the script that we want to run. So if I run that, then it just ran that script with that version of Python. And we can see that that ran very quickly. And the reason that it ran very quickly is because it went out to my site and got a 200 response since the site is working. And it didn't do any of the emails or restarts or anything like that. So hopefully that's what it's going to do most often when it runs, is just run very quickly like this. Okay, so I'm going to copy this entire command, and that's what I'm going to schedule to run every 10 minutes. So on my machine, I can access cron from the command line by saying cron tab -e. That's -e for edit. And you can see that I don't currently have anything in my cron tab right now. Now, by default, cron opens up in the Vim editor. Now, if you aren't comfortable in Vim, then you can change the editor to Nano or something like that. Now, I felt like I've said this a lot during this video, but I'm not going into the details of cron here, but I do have a detailed video tutorial on using cron, and I'll leave a link to that video in the description section below also if you'd like to learn more about cron in depth. But for now, let me just write out this cron schedule, and then I'll explain exactly what it's doing. So in Vim, if you want to insert something, then you have to hit I first, and we can see down here that it says insert. So now I'm going to type out this schedule. So for this schedule, I'm going to do an */10 space asterisk space asterisk space asterisk space asterisk. So basically, the schedule that we have here will run our command every 10 minutes on every day of the year. So the first value here is what minute we want to execute our command. The */ means that we want to run this command every 10 minutes. Now, the next value here, the second asterisk, is the value for the hour. So our asterisk is saying that we want to run it every hour. The next value is for the day of the month. So this is every day of the month. The next value is for the month, so we set it to every month. And the last value here is the day of the week. So this is set to run on any day of the week. So that's our schedule, and this will run a command every 10 minutes. So now let's tell it what command we want to run every 10 minutes. So I copied that long command from my terminal from before, and I'm just going to paste this in here. Okay, and that is our entire cron schedule. So now I just want to save this. So in Vim, to save, I can just press escape, and that takes us out of insert mode. And now I can press :WQ for WQ for write and quit. So I will run that. It's going to tell me that this wants to do some administration. I'll just click OK. Now it says installing new cron tab. And if you ever want to list out your cron tab schedule, then you can say cron tab -L, and that'll show us all of the commands that we are running and on what schedule. Okay, so now that script should run every 10 minutes. So that should be it. Now, it would be nice to have some sort of feedback where we could go and check from time to time to make sure that our script is running. So that's another reason why it would be a good idea to add some logging into that script so that we could occasionally check the logs and make sure that everything is running properly. You know, make sure that it goes out and makes the request and anytime it runs into errors or anything like that. And there's probably a lot more that we could add to that script as well, but I think I'm happy with what I have here for now. And if I need to add to it in the future, then we can build from there. Now, I will put this script up on GitHub if anyone wanted to follow along but didn't necessarily want to write everything out here. So I will have a link to this in GitHub as well. And again, like I was saying before, if you want to write a script like this that monitors one of your websites, then you're going to have to change some of the environment variables here. So you're going to have your email username and password to send the email and a token for whatever service you're using. I'm using Linode, but I'm sure, probably DigitalOcean and other services have something like this as well. Okay, so I think that is going to do it for this video. Like I said, this video is a bit different than the tutorials that I usually cover. We didn't go into as much step-by-step detail here, but I get a lot of requests from people who want me to record little scripts like this that are, quick, dirty solutions to some daily problems that I run into. So that's really what I was shooting for here. But if anyone has any questions about what we covered in this video, then feel free to ask in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer those. And if you enjoy these tutorials and would like to support them, then there are several ways you can do that. The easiest way is to simply like the video and give it a thumbs up. And also, it's a huge help to share these videos with anyone who you think would find them useful. And if you have the means, you can contribute through Patreon, and there's a link to that page in the description section below. Be sure to subscribe for future videos, and thank you all for watching.